Welcome, everybody, to another in my ongoing, sometimes with big gaps in it, interview series on the new paradigm of business. This is I do different topics and different interesting leaders from time to time when the spirit moves me and I see something interesting that I think would be really good for the public of folks who are trying to create and run their new paradigm organizations to learn about. And so the this one struck me early this year. I said, I've got to do something on psychological safety. It's not something I personally teach as a we don't do classes in psychological safety at the True Purpose Institute or anything like that. But in the work that I do, I have to create a fair amount of psychological safety in order to be able to get away with the things that I do, finding the higher purpose of organizations and other stuff like that, helping individual employees with their purpose. So we'll talk about that. So I think it's a fascinating topic. I plan to learn about it today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tim Kelly. I'm the author of the book True Purpose. And amongst various other things I do, I'm very much trying to transform business and transform human society in the belief that we can do much better than we are. And so I'm trying to educate the audience of business leaders about what a new paradigm company looks like and how you would go about creating one. And there's a bunch of different features, and the feature we're going to talk about today is psychological safety. So I'm delighted to be introducing and joined by two of my buddies and sometime clients, Raema Delange and Brett DeShepper. So Raema comes out of the valve and pipe industry in oil and gas. He has a degree in what is it, mechanical engineering, Raema? Is that right? And
Yeah.
also an MBA, right? So,
Unfortunately not. No.
oh, okay. So you did, but you did study business administration at
Yes. Yeah.
Avans Hogeschool. Okay, good,
Yeah.
cool. And
Very
then
much so.
after
Yeah.
working for himself and working for other companies for a number of years in the Middle East, selling valves to the oil and gas industry, he was a founding partner of Energy Circles BV, a Dutch company that sells valves to the oil and gas industry, but now much more, because I'm pleased to say that this is an excellent example of a new paradigm organization because Energy Circles uses holacracy. Energy Circles has a higher purpose. Energy Circles is transitioning to be a for purpose enterprise. And the reason I invited Raema was when I went there to find the higher purpose of Energy Circles, one of the things we do, those of us who are trained in the true purpose methodology of finding the purpose of companies, is we find the purpose of a bunch of the employees in the company. And I noticed an extraordinary degree of relaxation and comfort of doing deep personal psychological work in each other's presence amongst the employees, and thought, this guy knows how to create psychological safety. And as we were talking about shortly before we started recording, Raima does this pretty much naturally. And so I'll be very interested to hear how he goes about this. So Brett's background is similar in some ways and different than others. Brett has a degree in computer science from RPI, and he's had a number of jobs as a hardware engineer, software engineer, computer scientist, user interface designer. So he's got geek credentials, better geek credentials than I do. He's done more coding than I have and been paid more money for it than I have. Um, and also, though, Brett has a PhD from Berkeley in cognitive science, which is another reason why Brett's here. I've got Brett here for two reasons. And after doing a bunch of computer science work for a while, Brett was one of the founding founders of, don't tell me, ah, it left my brain, Brett, the name of the company I worked with for years. What?
iHome Finder.
iHome Finder, thank you. iHome Finder Inc., which I'm delighted to say was a longtime client of mine, despite my inability to remember the name of it, which I could walk to. It was in walking distance of my house, which is just for me, as who flies around. I love flying around the world to spend time with Raymond and his company, but it's such a relief to get to walk to a company. So Brett and I are neighbors and worked with Brett for many years as individually and as a leader of this company. And Brett led the company as CEO for nearly 22 years and eventually had a successful exit event, sold the company. And during that time, he and I founded Higher Purpose twice. And Brett also got trained in the collaborative operating system. So instead of Holacracy, which is one self-organizing system, Brett has expertise in a different one, the collaborative operating system, which he used at iHome Finder, a partial implementation of that system. So we'll talk about that a little bit too. And I had a similar experience at Brett's company, helping individual employees find their own purpose. And we even did some parts work with your employees, Brett. I don't know if you remember that, but we had a whole training
Yeah.
for them and how to talk to the different parts of their psyche and all that, which I very rarely do at companies. And they were all fine with that too. So another case where the people were very comfortable doing deep psychological work in one another's presence in the workplace, which to me is one of the signs that I get in the work that I normally do of psychological safety. So Brett is here both as a business leader who has created psychological safety in his companies, and also as a subject matter expert, since he knows more than Rayma and I do about how the brain works from his PhD in cognitive science, and can talk to us about the theory behind psychological safety as well. And Brett, can you tell us anything about your new company, or would you have to shoot us? Where you're in an early stage startup now, right?
No, I can tell you a little bit about it. It's a neuroscience-based startup, so it's drawing on the PhD, the cognitive neuroscience of attention, and we have a mobile software that it stabilizes attention, which has all kinds of amazing effects, as Buddha figured out a long time ago, right? It has great effects on the mind. So we're about to go into beta testing mode and doing some fundraising on that soon. So we're getting it off the ground.
Beautiful. Best of luck with that. So
Thank you.
maybe that will create some psychological safety for the rest of us when we eventually use your app.
Excellent.
Good. So Brett, I want to start with you. Oh, actually, let me just say, by contrast, when I say that I've been in both of these guys' companies, the companies that they founded, and observed high degrees of psychological safety, I want to say I've also been in companies where psychological safety is horrifyingly low. And I have to say the worst places I've ever been in terms of psychological safety was the boardrooms, the executive teams of large publicly traded companies. Horrifying, like swamp of politics and backstabbing, just shocking how bad it is. And as a result, a lot of the things that I like to do, like finding the higher purpose of a company or stuff using very deep probing methods, just aren't an option in that environment. I can remember one executive team where two of the members of the executive team decided to do purpose work with me. And I said, well, great, let's do it together. I knew for a fact that these two were personal friends. So I got another person to help me out, and we went to a hotel, like one of those, like where they cut off part of the ballroom, right? You got a section of a hotel, and we got in there with the two guys, and even though they had been friends for years and were colleagues on this team, they would not do the purpose work in each other's presence. So I had to get another room and separate them, and have me work with one and another guy work with the other. I was like, and these guys are friends, right? It's just really shocking in the old paradigm, standard way of doing business, how low psychological safety is. So that this is now, good mathematician, have to define my terms. Brett, help us out here. When we say psychological safety, what do those words mean?
Right. So psychological safety was originally, the term was invented by this professor at Harvard Business School, Amy Edmondson, and it's the way she defines it. It's a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, concerns, questions, or mistakes. So, it's a pretty simple definition. It gets interesting when you start to unpack it.
Yeah, well, let's unpack it a little.
Yeah. I mean, what you want to think about is the flip side of that, which is what happens if you do something that looks like, you ask a question, it makes you look ignorant,
Mhm.
or you admit that you made a mistake, or you might not know something. You look
Mhm.
incompetent,
Mhm.
or you might be afraid that you're being intrusive, or um, you don't want to bring up something because it seems too negative. It's it's questioning the status quo.
Now,
All of
now a
those
lot of that
things.
stuff's internal though, right? I may have a fear that I'm intruding, or I may have a
Exactly. These are
fear I'll be
fears.
humiliated, or I may have a fear that someone's going to punish me if I admit to a mistake.
Exactly.
And that may have nothing to do with the environment. That could be all me because my dad was mean to me when I was young, or my teacher humiliated me, or
Absolutely.
whatever, right? So
So
how?
there's always that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Generally what happens, there's norms that come about in groups, and it's usually based on a small number of interactions where somebody puts something out there that's a little vulnerable, maybe showing some weakness, and somebody absolutely just shoots them down, or makes
Mhm.
a snide remark, or
Mhm.
they're ignored.
Mhm.
um, there are a lot of ways that can happen. Some are very obvious aggressions, and some are more microaggressions, some are passive
I love that
aggressive.
term, microaggression.
Microaggressions, right? Yeah. And but what happens is that when the person that put it out there feels ignored or put down,
Mhm.
but the entire rest of the group is also now
Oh, they're all watching. They're
understands.
doing the
They're
math.
all
It's like,
right. They're like,
I do
this is
that,
not
so
a
that's
safe
what's going to happen
place,
to me.
right?
Yeah.
And so
All
the
right.
group quickly learns what is and is not safe.
Right. Right. Right.
Um, so that's really what determines psychological safety in a group.
And
Um,
conversely, if someone takes a risk and nothing bad happens and something good happens as
exactly.
a result, now it probably takes a
Mhm.
few iterations of that before people are willing to conclude that it's generally safe, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's easy to, you can have a great track record of having a safe place, and then
Mhm.
something happens and you shut it down. It's easy to lose that trust, right?
Right. Right. Right.
Um, but yeah, it's exactly. It's a really, and also the leader showing vulnerability, admitting
Mhm.
that you don't know something,
Mhm.
being honest and vulnerable is a um, huge step towards establishing psychological safety,
Great. So,
right?
so
So
the
you got to,
leader is the term leader, right? And here now we're talking about
well, yeah,
hierarchy, right? But the term
exactly.
leader
Yes.
implies going first, right? That's what to lead
Hmm.
means, go first.
Right.
And so I go first as a leader by modeling that this is acceptable behavior, by admitting a mistake, by sharing an emotion, by doing something like that.
Saying I don't know something. Yep.
That's right. And now everyone else goes, oh, well, if the leader's doing it, maybe that's safe. And then
That's a
they
powerful
start
signal.
watching and testing and seeing if they can get away with it too or
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
something. Cool. Interesting. All
I
right,
think,
cool.
guys, we found that link to the missing MBA degree.
We did.
That makes me say a lot. I don't know.
Right. No, Tim, I don't have an MBA, but thanks for offering me one. Yeah. Right. Good. So now why does it matter? So the one piece of research I'm aware of is the stuff Google did, where they did this
That's
huge
huge. Yep.
survey of their teams and looked at which were the highest performing teams and then tried to find correlations with that. And I think they found something like 5 different factors.
Mhm.
And the one that correlated most, the one that made the biggest difference for performance, was psychological safety. Do I have that roughly
That
correct?
is exactly right. They spent a lot of time, and the assumption initially was that you take a bunch of the smartest people, you put them all in a room, they're going to
Yeah.
come up with the best answer. Um,
And the
yeah,
answer is not necessarily, it
not
depends.
necessarily, right? And so they tried a lot of different things. And it turns out that psychological safety is far and away, there are 5 factors, but psychological safety is far and away the biggest of those.
Right.
The others are more common ones, alignment around a common goal, right? Things you'd
Yeah.
expect.
Right.
But psychological safety was kind of like, huh, interesting.
Really?
Wow,
That's the biggest one?
that's
What
the
is
big
that?
one. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Right.
Right.
So what are some other benefits from either of you? What are some things that you've seen either personally as a leader or through the research and discussion of it? It's like, what if I were a business leader, why would I care? Why would I want to create? I'm trying to create value for shareholders or pursue my purpose or whatever. How does psychological safety in my environment? Because it sounds like it's going to be a pain in the butt to create. It's going to take a while, and I'm going to have to be vulnerable, right? What's the benefit of it? Why would I want to do that?
Yeah. So personally, obviously, there's this sort of a longing for to set yourself free to behaviors, to act on behaviors that create that atmosphere. So if you want to connect to your environment, you want to be with people and really make that connection. The only way to create an atmosphere where that's possible is creating the safety for it.
So you're talking about being authentic at work and having like actual relationships in the workplace and stuff like that. Is that what you're talking about? Yep.
That's for me. It was actually one of the reasons I started all over again with the company, founding a company, because I found myself building the same hierarchic organization, and I felt lonely again in the end. Like I was aiming for working with my friends, and then I found that it got again a bit awkward and not connected anymore. So for me, that was an insight to say there's a deeper wish there to do it differently. And I know you later on want to make the link to self-management and to create a culture where people find their own leadership and passions and meaning in life, in work. But these obviously also lead to the business advantage I see. If we
Well, before you go there, I just want to say, because that's something I haven't heard someone say before, that if I'm the leader of a hierarchy, this I have heard people say, if I'm the leader of a hierarchy, it's lonely at the top. Like that's a saying that people hear, right? And the people who work for you in some way, shape, or form can't really be your friends completely in a hierarchy. But what you're saying is that, well, that loneliness is optional, right? If you create a high degree of psychological safety, and we'll talk about the self-organization later, that maybe some of that is possible, right? That more authentic, more personal relationships in the workplace are possible if the psychological safety is higher than normal. Am I interpreting what you're saying correctly?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
and it's not easy to do within a big organization, but for instance, it would work if you would have a common set of rules and that apply to everybody in the organization. That would already help big time to. But yes, you're right. That's what I.
And you were starting to say about business advantage. So say more about that.
The for me the biggest paradigm shift. We somehow always had that belief that there's a few smart people in our group, and those people have the ideas and they lead, and we all bring the action to fulfill the work around it. Not respecting that there's like many bright people around that actually organize amazing things in their personal time, in their private time. And then you also want this creativity and these ideas in your company. And it's a very opportunistic thought that I'm very honest about. I see that there's so much more to develop and come up with almost a common wisdom if everybody steps in, and not everybody looking at me as the founder or.
We may need to have a future conversation about collective intelligence. I'm starting to sense
that's a key motivating factor for me as well, as why I did it. I figured out that the term psychological safety and all these other things later, and it's like, oh yeah, that's what I was doing, right? So in some ways, it's very much of this discovery that's like, no matter how smart I might think I am or not. There's a lot of other wisdom in the room. And if you can create a process where you get everybody's best thinking to come together, the group, that collective wisdom almost invariably comes up with a better answer that addresses whatever it is you're trying to do, than if you were trying to do it with just you or one or two other real, supposedly the smart people in the room. So, right. So if you start from that place, you're going to create psychological safety so people feel free to put in their input. And you do come up with really good decisions if you have a process that can make that happen.
Right. So the psychological safety plus good process creates group intelligence. Yeah, I'm thinking future call on that.
Yeah,
That's a
I
whole
think
other
so.
ball of
Yeah,
wax.
so I'm right there with you, Rima. That's
Yeah, cool.
yeah.
Awesome. And just as a little teaser for that future thing, groups can consistently outthink individuals. A group can create
Mhm.
a better solution than the smartest person in the group can working by themselves with psychological safety and a good process. More on that
Yes.
in a future call. Now I know what the next one's about. Great.
Yes.
So so any other key advantages that you can see, and the thing you're saying, Raima, about a different quality of workplace relationship, let me say that that's more important, according to the research, to purpose-driven individuals. So according to Imperatives research, about a third of employees are purpose-driven. That is, they personally are motivated by purpose. And those employees seek to create lasting relationships in the workplace, because they're coming to work to find co-conspirators to help them manifest their purpose. They're not trying to avoid work so they can have more leisure, like the classic economics would say. A lot of people who are just coming to work for the money may not care about lasting, deep workplace relationships. They get that outside of work. I'm here for the paycheck. You're not my friend. You're my coworker. I'm going to go do that somewhere else. But not the purpose-driven ones. They're like, hey, we're going to be here working together, changing the world. Let's be pals and help each other, right? So I think that it matters more in a purpose-driven environment to have those kind of relationships than it would in a sort of classic old paradigm where just here it's just business kind of thing. So, any other benefits either of you see to creating psychological safety? If you successfully create it, what else do you get for that? We got high performing teams, better relationships. What else? Higher group intelligence.
That's of that game. The one I would mention first, though, is I just see a very elevated group of people. So I work with people that are often high in their energy, happy, are fun to talk to. So these are not normal things in corporate environments. I have a colleague, and she joined us a few months ago, and it was her job, not really, but she was the Monday morning girl. She would go into the office and sort of bring a little atmosphere and have a fun conversation. Because without it, the week was a poor start for many people.
Yeah.
It's hard to understand or hard to believe, even if you have a different reality or you created a different reality for yourself. But that brings a lot. I mean, having that emotional, being in that emotional place obviously brings another pool of creativity and easy to tap into great ideas or peace of mind that you need for it. So that's for me a really important driver.
Let me say that great ideas thing that dovetails with something that was forming in my brain. And thank you for that, Raima, because a lot of organizations are like trying to develop innovation and creativity and new ideas because the environment's evolving so quickly that they know that if they're not evolving too and they're not innovating, they're going to get left behind, right? And the literature is full of stories of how the biggest, baddest company on the block suddenly became a dinosaur and was obsolete overnight. But I don't see how you can have really high degrees of innovation with low psychological safety. I don't think it's possible, like biologically. Is that true, Brad? Am I right about that?
I would agree with that. It's
like what happens. So the brain responds to safety or lack of safety differently, right? What goes on?
Yeah, when it's not safe, people shut down. They tend to stick with the status quo, with the whatever the norms are in the group, and so you get often what's called groupthink, right? This idea that that everybody aligns around a common set of ideas, whether or not those are correct, but it's just kind of, they align around the
If they're
leaders.
socially acceptable, then they must be the right ones, because then I won't get fired if I agree with them.
Right. And so often it's the loudest voices in the room that get heard, and everybody
Mhm.
aligns around that. So if you can create a space where all the voices get heard, and that's a big part of it, is making sure you've heard from everybody.
Mhm.
This again kind of starts to go back to the collaborative piece of it, but I feel like that's essential. There's an analogy I use sometimes. It's if you imagine, everybody all lined up facing the same direction, you're going to have one view of reality.
Mhm.
And you'll make certain decisions based on that. But if you can get everybody in a circle, so everybody's got you, and you create a space where everybody's viewpoint can be heard, so the person across from you can see behind you, the person to your right can see over that way, right? So
Mhm.
if you've got people in a circle, you've got all 360 degrees covered. Now you can make a better decision. You're getting all the facts of the situation, a lot of different perspectives, backgrounds, right? All these different things coming together, you're going to create a better decision that better matches the reality you're trying to solve, and you're going to have better innovation. So,
Mhm.
right. So it's and so I've seen that in groups. I've also seen, Google has found that in terms of their studies, right? That's exactly what they found, is that these teams are more effective. They're people are happier. They make better decisions. They innovate more, right? All these things that you'd expect to come out of it do.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I like to tell my CEO clients that if you rule by
Hmm.
fear, then everyone who works for you will be stupid, because they're going to be
Yeah,
thinking with their amygdalas, which is this tiny
exactly.
little thing in the middle of the brain, instead of this strategic, emotionally intelligent cerebral cortex that can do all of this other stuff.
Yes.
So you're shutting down the most powerful parts of the brain when you keep people in stress. So
Yes. Absolutely.
yeah, good. Cool. Glad I didn't get that
That
wrong.
there's
Yeah, the amygdala can hijack the frontal cortex, right? If there's fear in the room, it's a powerful kind of brainstem or limbic system, and it
Mhm.
just kind of grabs the cortex and just takes it offline. So yeah, people kind of talk about, like, is this, it's like, this is the core part of your brain, and the cortex is wrapped around it. If you're doing well, the cortex is working.
Yeah.
But if something triggers that amygdala, you flip your lid.
Yeah.
Right. This is Daniel Siegel down at UCLA talks about this, and it's
Mhm.
right, when your lid's flipped, you can't make good decisions.
Yeah. I've
So
heard it called an amygdala hijack
yes, exactly.
or an amygdala override or
Yes.
something like that. Yeah.
Yep.
Good. Yeah. So if you want
Mm,
creativity, you want innovation, you want new and
mm.
interesting ideas, different ways of looking at things, then also, a lot of new paradigm leaders are trying to help people individually evolve their own consciousness in the
Yes.
workplace. And
Yes.
that requires a very high degree of psychological safety. And that's what had me see both of you as good exemplars of that, because in both of your companies, I've done deep personal work with people in groups in the workplace, and they were fine. Which to me, I was like, okay, this is the thermometer says very high psychological safety given their reactions, not a statistical survey or anything like that. But I think it's a good kind of canary in a coal mine way of testing. If no one wants to find their purpose or talk to their parts in front of anybody else that they work with, that would be an indicator that psychological safety is low. So what else about how to create psychological safety, right? So let's say I'm a leader and I'm listening and I'm thinking, okay, you sold me. I'm willing to spend some energy and effort to create psychological safety in my organization. What do I do? And what do I not do to make that a reality? Rema, do you want to give it a shot at this?
Well, I think all the things we've mentioned until now are very personal related. So, as a leader, being vulnerable and being open about the things you, like Brett mentioned, you don't know or you don't have an answer for now,
Or mistakes
or
you've
that
made?
mistakes you make, emotions you have, you feel sad about something or angry even. Um, so these are very personal things to share with others. So that needs like a very much an awareness of your behaviors, and
Mhm.
like so, and it might even go into what is my beliefs here about the group I live in, I work in.
Mhm.
and how do I perceive them, and how do I see them in the rest of the world, and is that supporting um, um, a safer work environment, or might there maybe be things that are bothering me as a person? So I
Right.
think it's very much a personal development search that is connected to it. There's no other way, I'm afraid. There's no special task or a project or module to put in, and it's not a cognitive thing. It's an emotional journey, I think,
Mhm. Mhm.
exploring yourself and understanding how behavior leads.
Mhm. And I could understand why some people would rather do without the psychological safety and all the great performance it creates in order to avoid the personal discomfort. An earlier version of myself, for example. I can empathize with that. Yeah. Good. And you said something interesting I hadn't thought of, Rama, relative to this topic, which is beliefs, right? There are certain beliefs business leaders hold about business, about their own companies, about the people who work for them that interfere with this. Like I know they've done research and found that most managers believe that the people who work for them are only in it for the money. When you survey the people who work for them, it's not true. But the fact that the manager holds that belief will cause them to treat those people in a certain way that is unlikely to create psychological safety. That's just one example. Or executives who say, "Oh, well, these people aren't strategic thinkers. They can't contribute to a conversation about X," or something like that. That's a belief, right? Which has probably not been tested because they probably haven't brought strategic questions to them and given them a fair shot at it in the past, right? It's probably just based on an assumption. So those kinds of beliefs can really interfere with this process. Brett, what would you say about how to create psychological safety?
So one of the elements is to approach problems with curiosity.
Mm,
So ask a lot of questions. And if you come out sounding like you already kind of know the answers or you already have a direction, um, people tend to be like, yeah, well, he should know, right? Or he's the expert or he's the leader, whatever it is, sure, I'll go with that. So
mhm,
you need to create the space where, you know, ask questions about it, probe. Somebody says something, actually try to get at it, right? If it doesn't make sense to you, right? So one way to approach something doesn't make sense is you could ignore it or put it down. That diminishes psychological safety. If you say, I'm not sure I understand, can you say more about that? You know, what do you mean by that, right? So you try to unpack it. You try to get to what their assumption is behind that.
mhm,
You either learn that they've got some valuable nugget to bring into the conversation that's actually valuable and adds to the improves upon the outcome,
mhm,
um, or you find maybe that they have a slight misunderstanding,
mhm.
um, and you can clear up that misunderstanding, which is great because now they're more in alignment with the group and right. So no matter what happens, you're better off. And sometimes you learn as a right, you know, even as a subject matter expert, you know, you actually like, oh yeah, that's right.
Mhm.
That's a good point. So no matter what, you win. So
Yep.
right, ask questions. And one of the criteria people talk about is you want to have ideally everybody in the room should be heard from at
Yep.
least once before the end of every meeting.
Yep.
Um, and the more equal airtime is among the participants, the more likely it is you've got psychological safety. And if
Right.
you've got a few people dominating, probably you don't have psychological safety.
Yeah. And I know that both Holacracy and the collaborative operating system, as a best practice, have a full check-in hearing from everyone at the beginning and a full check-out hearing from everyone at the end, in part for this very reason, right? To make sure that everyone gets to put their voice out and be heard.
Mhm.
So speaking of which, and we will go to Q&A in a few minutes. Those of you who are listening live, I know some of you are watching the recording. Those of you who are listening live get the benefit of you can either put a question in the chat, or if you raise your hand, if you want to ask your question out loud, I can just promote you to a panelist so you can say stuff out loud to our folks. We'll do that in a few minutes. In the meantime, think about questions you have, and you can put them in the chat or raise your hand now. No need to wait. And then I'll be happy to call on you or voice your question when we do get to the Q&A section. In the meantime, though, I want to talk about, we alluded to the relationship of hierarchy versus self-organization to psychological safety. And Rem, I'm curious, you've been a company using Holacracy for years, and now you're transitioning to a for-purpose enterprise using Encode's system. And I'm curious what effects you think that has had or could have on psychological safety.
Yes, it's an interesting question. One of the reasons I was so interested in Holacracy as a model, which was basically a really intuitive decision to start doing it. But one of the reasons I was interested was the ways the meetings are facilitated.
Mm-hmm.
Not only the efficiency of it and the effectiveness of it, but also the way everybody has airtime, like Brett just mentioned. So there's no way you hide in a meeting, because you're always there at least for a check-in and a check-out. You can decide not to attend the meeting, which is also leadership. And all this gives a lot of information. It says a lot about how safe people feel. And for me as a leader, to also observe and decide where to spend my time, and to just sense what's going on, or find out what's going on without babysitting people, but really from a perspective that serves the organization, the purpose of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
So that was an important driver for me in Holacracy. And for-purpose enterprise, obviously we take it to a next step, because the power shift is now also in the legal context, which means although I'm still holding, in my case, 85% of the C units, the capital interest units, I'm an investor now, and I act from that role, and I can process my tensions into the enterprise, but I don't hold any authority to act into the operations.
Mm-hmm.
So
the fact that you own 85% of the stock doesn't mean you can tell people they have to do things this way or can't do them that way.
That was already long history. Yet the action for me as a shareholder to make that decision, I can see people respond to it in a very positive way, because they see how seriously I take it to say we as a community are the right people to do this and make this purpose mission work. It's not just me or some people in this company. We all do that together, and with all our different qualities, and that's what makes the group. Yeah, so it all contributes to the same, and on another level, I think.
Yeah, and I think if people are using Holacracy correctly, where someone can't tell me how to express the purpose of my role, that gives a feeling of power to individuals, that by itself creates a sense of safety, right? Other people's commentary on how I'm doing my job is feedback and suggestions, not orders and instructions that I have to follow. And if I'm unhappy about something, there's places for me to go to process those tensions, so I can keep fixing the stuff that's creating a pain in my butt in my day-to-day work, which I imagine creates some degree of safety as well. So, yeah. And Brett, you're more of a aficionado of the collaborative operating system, and you've used a lot of its principles and practices in your business leadership. What would you say about psychological safety and COS?
Right. So COS, the key elements there are ownership and alignment, often abbreviated O&A because you use it so often.
O&A to their friends, yes.
That's true, yes. And the idea is you want to get ownership in the sense that everybody who's part of a decision, everybody there feels that they participated in creating the decision, right? They have some ownership of it. And then alignment is that everybody's kind of, the analogy, I guess, is you're in the same boat rowing the same direction, right? It's so, and the advantage of that, it might take a little longer to get that full alignment, but once you're there, everybody's on the same page and the execution is so much better. And you avoid politics because now everybody's got an alignment. They don't need to use back channels in politics to try to undermine a decision they didn't actually like. So, people would often say, it's like, I love being in an environment where there's no politics. This is amazing, right? I heard that a lot. And so that's the beauty of the collaborative operating system is, you're constantly getting that alignment. What you, as a, whatever, there's a hierarchical leader, right? Somewhere in my head as a model. And what you have to give up with this, you have to give up some control, right? It's, it's like, you have to, because if you override the group and make a command decision, an executive decision, it does reduce the psychological safety, and it can
and it violates both COS and Holacracy, right? If you
exactly.
If you pull out and dust off your old hierarchical leader card and override something, then you've just demonstrated to everybody that you're not really committed to the self-organizing system, or that you're only committed to it when it's convenient and not when it's inconvenient. And now they all know that it's not real.
Exactly. And that's an issue when you're a major shareholder, because the assumption normally is the major shareholder or shareholders that it's my company, I can do what I want with it.
Yep.
Right. And it's like, well, no, not if you
seen
really
other organizations using self-organization where there's one major shareholder and everyone really does still treat that person as a hierarchical leader, even though they've seemingly correctly installed a collaborative system. That projection of the hierarchical leader is still intact. And I did not see that at Energy Circles, Raimo, which I consider a real achievement on your part.
Yeah, it's impressive. It sounds like you're taking it further than I did with iHome Finder, which is, I admire that. So well done.
Yeah. And for those who are unfamiliar with them, the collaborative operating system and Holacracy the structures are more similar to each other than they are to hierarchy. In Holacracy, you have nested rings. In the collaborative operating system, you have interlocking rings, but the rules are almost exactly the reverse. In Holacracy, you're delegating all power to individuals and avoiding group decision-making at all costs. And in COS, group decision-making is the default. So they're almost polar opposites, but they're two completely valid, perfectly fine, well-used systems of self-organization that are good for slightly different things. So, Raimo, you were about to say something.
Thank you. So there, when Brett is telling, saying this part about disrupting this by still behaving like the authority leader, I think this also was part of my personal growth in introducing Holacracy, because my confrontation was that I was actually dominating meetings. I'm also like from that background, and so I was just doing what I thought was what is leadership, and I have an opinion, then I speak up. So Holacracy was a great tool for me to get confronted with it, and even today, it doesn't happen a lot, but if still some old habit pops up and I sort of not even intentionally try to overrule somebody, or somebody feels like being overruled, it's super powerful because they correct me and I realize and I respond to it, and not even oops, I just say, yeah, you're completely right. It's like a great insight, old behavior. And then it really contributes again to even makes it stronger. And I was like, so it's crucial how to respond to it. And I have this funny habit to say very often, if I want to say anything, because I'm still the idea machine of our organization, it's just me. It's not my rule, it's not my authority. Just want to share this information with you. It's up to you to do anything with it or not. And I just always say that same sentence before I start talking. And I think it's also a very conscious habit And it might be words for some people, but for me, it's really important to have that reflection before I start talking. And so I don't do it for them, I do it for myself. Which is small things that really make it better, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that I think that may be a key difference between your organization and the one I'm thinking of, where I don't think they confront the leader when the leader says something that sounds like an authoritative instruction, which under holacracy, if the leader says, I think you should do this, there's two ways of interpreting that. One is, oh no, he's being a hierarchical leader. The other is, thank you for sharing. Right. And some of that depends on the listener, but the behavior of the listener is going to be influenced by the degree of psychological safety in the organization. If psychological safety is low, I'm not going to say thank you for sharing to the 85% shareholder. Because I'm thinking, oh, that could be a career limiting move. I remember at Oracle, actually, towards the end, I got myself in an interesting version of psychological safety where I was so frustrated and disengaged that I didn't care if I got fired. So I would start pushing back against senior VPs and people who would say, oh, we're going to do it this way. And everyone's looking at each other like, really? That's the party line you're going with? And I'd say, excuse me, that doesn't make any sense at all. Blah, 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 blah. And everyone kind of holds their breath to see if I get fired, right? I didn't care. But that's not the norm. That's not the preferred way of creating psychological safety. Where you just don't care about the consequences. Any other tips you want to offer for a leader trying to create psychological safety? And actually, I had one other thing I wanted to bring up. So it sounds like both COS and holacracy, and probably any really well implemented, organized, self-organizational system, whether it's a pre-created one like those or one you create yourself, if done properly, should help, I would think, increase psychological safety vis-a-vis hierarchy. Hierarchy is not a psychological safety generating machine in my experience. You could do it in a hierarchy, but it seems like it would be much easier in a self-organizing system. Would you guys agree with that?
That's certainly been my experience. Although Google is a hierarchical company, and that research came out of Google, and they found that there was enough variability in teams to see a huge effect of ones that had it and those that didn't. So I think within a team, the leader of that team can create a safe space. So,
well, that's the thing. In the
it's
hierarchy,
within the team.
it's completely dependent on the leader of
Yes.
that local environment to create psychological safety or not.
Right. Exactly.
Which is going to make it difficult to create it system-wide, I think.
Yes.
And what happens in a system where you have created a lot of psychological safety and you wind up with somebody disrupting it? I think both of you have dealt with that, right? Someone who's really not on the psychological safety train going the same direction as everybody else and starts behaving in a way that erodes psychological safety. Can you talk about that at all?
You want to go first, Brett?
Sure. You have to speak up. If you let somebody who's bring some of those what I would consider toxic behaviors into a group, and you let them get away with it, and sometimes it's subtle, right? Cracking jokes that are at somebody else's expense, right? Everybody's, it's like, what? You can't take a joke? What's the problem, right? It's like you got to catch that stuff and not let them get away with it. Snide remarks, rolling of eyes, right? Sometimes, right? Some things, they can be subtle. It's not always overt. You can't let people get away with that because it just squashes the psychological safety of the group. You can also work a little bit around that by intentionally bringing up the other voices and, saying, so, Susan, I haven't heard from you for a while. What do you think about this? And then, just make sure the rules of the road are established, right? Just like, we're looking for equal airtime, right? So that is a goal. So we don't want somebody dominating. So it's somebody's like, okay, so, let's hear from everybody else more now. So there are ways you can redirect that and retrain people who come in often from other larger companies, they bring these kind of toxic ideas in, and you have to kind of retrain them about how things are
Re-educate 'em.
done around here.
And
Yeah.
I've seen situations like that where the person who gets brought in is put in a position of authority where they have a significant influence and they can take out a whole sector of the organization with
Can
those
be a problem.
habits.
Yeah.
So, and some people can be retrained and re-educated, and some cannot.
Yes, exactly. How about you, Rayma? What have you seen?
Tricky one, because obviously, first of all, you're a group of people working together. So in a self-managed organization, you don't want to sort of babysit others, and you don't want to step in as the father and then say, hold on, I see behavior here, and is that what we want? Actually, the edge of safety would be that others speak up and say, sorry, but that's just not a way we have agreed to act. One of the things we did for ourselves is we created a people context, like we have a work context where all the work is organized. We have a people context, and in that people context, we all signed an association agreement. And in that agreement, it clearly states what we expect from each other as people, as humans, and how we create that safety for each other. Also, how we treat feedback. That you first ask permission to give feedback before you do it personally. We're not talking roles, but we then really talk personal feedback. So these are clear boundaries and rules to agree upon, or to accept if you sign. And we have a stunning hiring process. I can't say different. We have a few superstars that created that hiring system, and it's really a simple process where we get to meet people. We throw away resumes and letters. We don't do that. We meet people, and we basically check with them their life story. What was the more difficult, challenging periods in your life? How was that for you? We tell a little bit about ourselves, or actually a lot about ourselves. We really spend time together. And then eventually we go to a place where we do a spiral dynamics assessment, where we give insight for a person, but also in our own profiles. How does it look like? And then we, in our first month, we even ask them to not do anything, just be a newbie and not act any work, just read a few books, find your own purpose with the true purpose method, and really spend time together with your colleagues to experience if this is really the place you want to be. And then people find out it's really personal. We don't sort of leave anything behind. You go home because you have reasons, or you show up, and there's certain reasons for it. Then we share that stuff, everything of it. We have a special context for it, where it's basically, I always say, it's like, I don't even have that with most of my friends. There's so much, sometimes details in it. So if you don't fit that context, I think you feel really uncomfortable, and
I think they'd run screaming from the hiring process.
Yes.
That's great.
Yeah.
Are on a high level already for themselves, and really find that magic spot where they find their own leadership. But then there's people from different contexts and people from different environments, different cultures. We have like 7 nationalities in a group of 20 people. So some cultures are not that open for these kind of company culture. So that's a trip, that's a journey, and we support each other on it, and we respect that. For some, it's really convenient and easy, and for others, it's outside their comfort zone, and still they're there. Want to be
I've
there.
found even in the cultures that aren't that open to this stuff, it's really just a matter of percentages. It means that a smaller percentage of those people are keen to operate this way and have the tools to do so, and a larger percentage do not. But I haven't seen any culture on earth yet where nobody's up for this. So, yeah.
That's interesting. I appreciate your perspective there. The answer I gave actually, I realize, is coming from a hierarchical mindset to some extent, which is assuming that you're the leader of the organization or of the team that you're trying to work with, and it's your job to kind of possibly play traffic cop and say that's not okay.
Yep.
A step better would be to give, to ask everybody in the group to play that role, so you're not the only one doing it. And then obviously you've taken it even way beyond that. So yeah, again, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I think it's useful, Brett, because I think a lot of the people listening are not going to be running holacratic or COS organizations, and it's useful to hear what it looks like from a hierarchical perspective.
Yeah.
And within COS, there's a feedback agreement, and there's a communication agreement, and there's a conflict resolution agreement. So those same structures exist. Holacracy doesn't have them baked in, so there've been efforts in the last few years to extend holacracy in this direction with the for-purpose enterprise or the symbiotic organization, or holacracy itself is now bringing on someone who has a whole system of human interaction and how to give and receive feedback and resolve conflict and stuff. Because if you're going to run a new paradigm workplace, you're going to have good ways of dealing with that stuff. Otherwise, the culture is going to get eroded by not managing it and not handling it when it comes up.
Yep.
Yeah, good. Excellent. Well, I've learned a lot. I've had a great time. I have yet to see a question or raised hand from our audience, so we must have been so clear. I guess the last question I'd ask, and then we'll end on this note, is what connection, if any, do you see between individual purpose, organizational purpose, and psychological safety? I don't have a clear answer on this one. I'm just curious if you see any. The thing I named at the beginning is what I see, which is that if psychological safety is very low, it's hard to find people's individual purpose in the workplace and find the organization's purpose, at least using deep methods. It's difficult, direct methods. Is there any connection in the other direction you can see? Could you see how having an individual purpose or organizational purpose in the workplace might create psychological safety?
Well, what comes to mind is that finding your purpose is not per se a cognitive thing to do, right? It's like it goes a bit, especially if you use the direct method. It really is a personal journey. So even experiencing the emotions, if you touch that that purpose that thrills you or even scares you, or it no longer accepts for the person to ignore that. It's like a big thing. It will, if you ignore it, it will. I tell you, it will pop up again. Might take a while, but it will. So in that part, I see both sides. I see people exploring their purpose. That's for some people a challenge, and if they dare to do so and step in, then that's a great contribution to the safety of the organization. And the other way around, it creates for the people themselves that next step.
Brett, anything to add?
Yeah, I would say that for me, a large part of this is about engagement. That's kind of the common element I see there is, so if you have a clear purpose and people are on board with that, they're aligned with it, they find meaning in their work and they want to show up, they want to do the work, and they want to make the workplace better. And right, so they want to have a voice in what happens, right? So then it ties into the decision making, that ideally, if you have a non-hierarchical decision making process, people want to show up and they want to make it better because they love this kind of North Star of purpose that they're after. So, and then that's psychological safety as well, you create a high engagement culture, you get everybody shows up fully. So, yep.
Cool. Do you guys have another moment? Because the audience has finally come alive.
Okay.
So Tom Rausch, who's actually a trainer for the True Purpose Institute, who's currently running a program teaching consultants how to find the higher purpose of companies. So an insider to be sure, put the following in the chat. He said, purpose provides clarity, clarity provides certainty, and certainty provides psychological safety. So there's a connection from someone who finds the purpose of organizations for a living, among other things.
Nice.
Tom's also great at deliberately developmental organizations. We have someone else here saying, my experience right now is on the other side. Trust is weak and engagement very low. So good to hear the possibilities. Yeah, our heart goes out to all of you out there suffering in low psychological safety environments. Know that there are leaders trying to create high psychological safety environments, and I'm hoping this video will create more awareness of why it would be a good idea and how to do so. And thank you all for attending. And Raema and Brett, thank you so much for sharing your business expertise, and Brett, your cognitive science expertise. All contributions, another brick in the building as we create a new paradigm of business. Thank you both very, very much.
Thank you, Tim. This has been fun.
All right, and let me stop.